think about a business as a chain rather than as a rope. If a strand or two on the rope is frayed, the rope still holds. On balance, the rope just needs to be strong enough to carry the load. In a chain, if any one link is broken, that chain is useless. Like, it's broken.
If you're an entrepreneur who's built success but feels stuck in the grind, this podcast is for you. On the Live More Show, we give you short, powerful conversations to help you become more tech-savvy, time-rich, and totally free. Here's your host, Melanie Sikma.
CB Insights states that about 70% of startups fail because founders lose focus or burn out, not because their idea wasn't good. My guest today, Andrew Ackerman, has lived every side of the startup table. He's been a founder, investor, accelerator, director, and teacher, and he's built 2 companies from scratch, invested in over 70 startups, and mentored hundreds of founders through the chaos of entrepreneurship. Today, he's sharing the lessons, mistakes, and breakthroughs that every entrepreneur needs to hear. So I'm excited to dive in. Andrew, you've lived every side of the startup table, as we mentioned. You've been the founder, investor, teacher, and so much more. What does living more mean to you in this season of your life?
I heard early in my career, if you love what you do, you're never going to work a day in your life. So, actually, when I started, this didn't really exist. When I came out of business school, it was right door is for consulting, left door is for iBanking. I'm a little dyslexic, sorry. And then, anyone else, I don't know what you're doing here. But, it was about 4 or 5 years later, the internet started to happen. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. Did my first startup, and I was ruined for real work ever since, right? You got to find what you love, and then it won't be like you're pushing that boulder up a hill.
Yeah, for sure. Now, when you think back to building your first company, what did you get right about designing your lifestyle? And then what did you get very wrong?
Okay. So I'm going to say something that's a little counterintuitive, or maybe a little not what people want to hear. Early on in your startup, you have no lifestyle, right? You're all in. And I think people they feel this way and they feel like they should be having a balance, and then they don't, and they feel like something they're doing wrong. No, the first couple of years are going to be brutal. They're designed to be. In fact, I had a startup I invested in, a great company in New York. It's called Cherry. They're in the real estate space. And they're big, but they're still small enough that the CEO will interview everyone that comes to work for them. He's usually the last one on the list. It's usually a formality. But, I was like, what do I ask this kid? He's like, well, what's important to you? And the kid said, work-life balance. And LD's response was, totally get it. I'm going to help you find a startup that's a better fit for you. He was upfront about it. He's like, you're going to work here, you're going to get a ton of money, or you're going to work really hard, you're going to get this off the ground, and then you get balance. So be prepared for a couple of years that are going to be tough. Make sure anyone else in your life, like your wife, your husband, your partner, your family, maybe even your kids, maybe your dog, make sure they know you're going all in here for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then once you've gotten past that 0 to 1 step, then it's a little bit more like a marathon than a sprint.
Okay. And so it's those first 2 years, you'd say, or sometimes more?
Well, your mileage may vary. And it's also partly who you are, right? Sometimes you're like, I love doing this. I only want to work in sprints. I'll work like a dog for, 3-4 weeks, and I'll just take 4 days off. Or if you're really type A, a day off. At some point, it gets tough to manage, especially around other obligations. But yeah, it's going to be hard. If you think that you're going to come in and work a 40-hour week while you're trying to get something off the ground, this may not be the right path for you.
I think that's really good advice to give our listener, just because if they're, feeling burnt out, stressed out, to know that it's normal, but that there is, you can pull yourself out eventually, like you said, and then that's when you get balance. I think it's okay to accept that. And so whether people are starting to jump into something or they're in the grind, it's good to know that that is expected and that's normal. But having a plan to get out. So I guess leading into that, once you've done your time, we'll say, and you've been grinding and it's at the point, how do you know when it's time to then you can pull yourself out a little bit?
Well, it's usually when you can, but you're absolutely right. A lot of entrepreneurs who have built the business are very wary of letting go of pieces of things. Like, there's a famous story, I don't know if it's true or not, but it sounds true-ish, that Eisenhower could type faster than his secretary. But obviously, it made no sense for Eisenhower to type his own correspondences, right? It's okay that she was not, single quotes, "as good as him at this." The point was that she was good enough to get that off his plate and free up his hours for, I don't know, winning the war. So the your first constraint is that you just don't have the resources, right? When you're just getting off the ground, you really can't hire anybody else, right? And this is the same if you're a tech startup or if you're more of a traditional small business startup like a dry cleaner or, consultancy. When you start out, you're doing everything. Like my first startup, we built our own desks. And I don't mean we built our own desks from IKEA. I mean lumber. I mean
Wow.
like splinters on our palms because we didn't sand it well enough, right? And that's what you do when you don't have, money, right? So that also means that you wear zillions of different hats. Whatever needs to get done, it's all on you. And the context switching from like high level strategy to like sales, and all of a sudden, like I gotta go order like pods for the coffee machine, that can take a lot off of you, out of you. When you get to the point that your business is far enough along that you can think about hiring people to do some of these things for you, uh, be aggressive about getting stuff off your plate, right? If you can hire someone who's better than you at it, teaches you stuff that you can do, that's awesome. But if you have to, just find someone else for the less critical roles, just someone else who can do it for you so that you can free your time to do more of what's critical, like sales, thinking strategically about your business. That's kind of the inflection point. When you have the money, you know, you got to go spend that money to buy your time back.
Yeah, for sure. I know that Layla Hermosi, I went to her scaling, her and Alex Hermosi's scaling workshop, and they talked about how you might be a unicorn. Like it's very hard to find someone like you, but so you might not find another unicorn to replace you, but you can find a hippo and a toad and a horse maybe, and then they can maybe come up with all the things that a unicorn does. And so it might take multiple people also to replace the
Yeah.
way that you do it.
And that's okay. And you know what? They may not do it as well. They may not do it the same way. Be okay with that because at some point, you want to repurpose the hours of your day to the things that have the biggest bang for their buck. And they take 3 people to do your jobs, but if they took those hours off your plate and they're doing it well enough, it's worth it to get those hours back.
Mhm. I've myself had to let go of the things that don't really matter. Like if it's maybe a design thing or something that's really not a big deal, you gotta I'm like, okay, I gotta let that go because it's really not that big of a deal. It's getting done.
Yeah, same thing. I,
You
I
know.
was going through like the text on the website and like down to the detail pages, and I'm like, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Really, right now, a better use of my time is sleep. Nothing
Yep.
so horrible here.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. Well, great. I think those are great tips, and I think it's realistic to know that there are seasons that you're going to grind, and you're buying yourself time in the future, but have a path to then pull yourself out. So that's
And
great.
also, early on, like perfection is not needed. Right? A lot of people like they keep polishing and they're polishing, and then if it's a tech startup, they end up going to market late, and they've lost to someone else who just pushed to version 1.0. In the real world, obviously, you can see like if you're polishing and polishing and polishing one thing, you can't work on other things. So it may not kill your business, but it may kill your lifestyle.
Hmm.
There's a guy
Yeah.
in the tech world called Guy Kawasaki. Very cool guy, both in personally and in what he's done. And he's got a lot of great lines. One of his quotes to early stage entrepreneurs is, "Don't worry, be crappy." Okay to push. If you really look, you're doing something that's that, and this is a little different. Like in the startup world, like you run a dry cleaner, being crappy is not acceptable, right? The suits have to
Yeah.
come out looking nice. But if you're in the tech startup world and you've built something that is new and there's no one else doing it, and it solves a really painful problem, people will put up with a lot of blemishes and awkwardness because, oh my God, I am not going back to the old way. He also says that if you don't look at the first version of your product and think, oh my God, and you cringe at how ugly it was, you waited too long to ship that product. It's really something that's that valuable to people. Get it out there, get their feedback as quickly as possible. Take the time that you would be polishing it, but in your own bubble of like what you think people know, and repurpose that time to, I'm actually going to work on what the market has actually told me they want.
That's great. And you get feedback faster.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Now, you've had some wins and setbacks in your career, I'm sure. What did those seasons teach you about how to build a business that supports your life instead of consuming it?
Whew. God, that's like, a couple of days worth of stuff to begin with. My first startup was it was a pretty good success, probably solid double or triple depending on how you look at it. My second was, if you ever heard the expression, experience is what you get when you didn't get what you want.
Yeah.
Damn, it was a hell of an experience. I probably learned more from the second one, but let me give the highest thing here. Um, you will make a lot of mistakes. That's okay. In fact, anyone who says you got to be careful, don't know what they're talking about. There will be mistakes. The important thing is not to make mistakes that are so critical that they kill your business. I made tons of mistakes. I made mistakes that cost us a lot of money, but none of them doomed the business, and that was okay. Now, there are ways to do that. So one of the top tricks that I learned was, before I do anything, other than like the most trivial, like buying pods for the coffee machine, I ask myself, this is a success if. I got to finish that sentence. Like, I'm about to do something. How do I know it worked? So what's an example, right? I want your company, Melanie, to do a pilot. I want you to pilot my software. So we signed a 6-month pilot agreement. I give it to you for free. You're discounted. At the end of those 3 months, I'm like, great, are you going to become a customer? And you're like, well, I don't know if we got enough value. I got to think about it. Well, before we start that, what we should have done is I should have said, hey, Melanie, listen, this is the product. What does success look like for you? Like, what metrics should be we talk? If I save you 20%, on this process, is that a win, right? If you end up getting like $5 million in revenue out of this, is that a win? And you bake that right into your LOI, your letter of intent, the pilot agreement from the very beginning, so that in 3 months, you're not like, I don't know, did that work or not? And it can be anything as big as that, all the way down to like, I'm going to test paper flyers instead of email and see if that works. Well, how am I going to figure out if it's a success? Like, how am I measuring that?
Yeah. That's a great question. I'm going to actually add that in for our clients. I have a tax business, and I'm going to, one-stop tax strategist, I'm going to add that into our onboarding,
If I
because
save you 10%, is that a success?
I love it. Yeah, that's great. And not even that, it's like, okay, what does successful look like? Like, can they, is just us responding to your emails within a day? Is that a success? And then
Exactly.
they'll tell you. Yeah, I love that. Now, you mentioned to not make mistakes that are critical and that might kill your business. How do you know what those are? Because sometimes I've found entrepreneurs in the beginning, especially, or when you're in that grind mode, everything that comes at you feels like
Everything
detrimental.
seems critical, right?
Yeah.
So some of that comes with experience. So getting a good mentor often will help you, and not just a good mentor, the right mentor for your type of business. So you might have let's say you have a tech startup, and you got a neighbor, super successful entrepreneur, but what did she do? She was a great dentist, ended up buying a whole lot of dental chains, and has people working for her. And that's an awesome business, but it has nothing to do with what you're doing. So, good to have around, like good for support. The advice, you put a question mark on it. So if you have an e-commerce business, you want to find someone who's built an e-commerce business and can tell you, hey, Melanie, listen, like I know you're sweating the details of like this email copy, but it doesn't, maybe it does, but in this case, it doesn't really matter that much. Get the picture right, everything else will be fine. Right? Advice like that from someone who's been there and done it is critical. Advice like that for people who aren't in your industry, that's a big asterisk, right? It probably even counterproductive in a lot of cases.
That's great. That's good advice. It's just like, if you don't want to take marriage advice from somebody that's never been married, and you don't want to take parenting advice from somebody that's never been a parent. It's find somebody that's been where you want to go, and then they'll give you the tips to get there.
And I'm not even sure I would take advice, parenting advice or marriage advice. Like, you think about it, they have 1 data point or they have 3 data points of multiple kids. And like, everything is different. But,
Yeah.
Absolutely, if they haven't done it at all, like, why are you talking to them? And people are more than happy to give you advice, even if they don't really have any business to doing it. You'll get a lot of advice from lawyers about your website, and you're like, dude, you're billed by the hour. You work at a large firm. Like, you've done, no offense, zero entrepreneurial stuff.
Yeah.
And, I need to move fast. You move slowly, you make more money. So maybe I'm going to go talk to somebody else about this.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you've invested in over 70 startups. What patterns have you seen in the ones that have actually thrived financially and done well?
Awesome. Okay. There's a joke in my industry that, what does it take to train a VC? And the answer is 10 years and $50 million. The reasoning is, like, it takes a long time to know if I've made the right decision. Like, if I've made the wrong decision and the company's out of business in a year or two, I got that one, right? Loud and clear. But on the other hand, sometimes you don't know. Like, I've had companies that were really, really promising. COVID hit, they died. Now I see other companies doing the same thing that they did. So there's a whole bunch of luck involved in there. I will tell you a few things that I've learned over the years. The big one is I always trust my gut when it comes to the founder. Earlier in my career, I'd get so excited about a startup, like the problem they were solving was big and painful and frequent and widespread, and their solution was, oh my God, awesome. My partner would be like, yeah, but I don't think the founder really listens. He's not really that coachable. But listen, like, the business is going to be great. I can't not be in it. I've always lost money on that, every single time. So I've learned not to fall in love with everything else in the business and ignore my gut about the founder. More generally, right, I've learned to think about a business as a chain rather than as a rope, right? And the distinction here is a rope. Like, if a strand or two on the rope is frayed, the rope still holds, right? It's like, on balance, the rope just needs to be strong enough to carry the load. In a chain, if any one link is broken, that chain is useless. Like, it's broken. So I can go and I look at, like, a new startup, and if I find one thing wrong and it doesn't look like it's easily fixed, like, let's say I look at it, the market size is too small. Okay, could be a good business for the founder, but it's not going to get me venture returns. Like, it's not going to be like potentially a Google. Then there's no reason for me to, like, go on and read anything else, right? Can't fix that. It's not going to be a fit. So I used to maybe think of it like, okay, what's the weighted average of all the strengths and weaknesses? Now I realize, it's really just test each link.
Okay, I like that. It's a good analogy to think through. Now, what are the commonalities in the founders that you find? Since the founder seems like the biggest thing, what are the commonalities that you find in them?
The ones that are backable.
Yes.
So by and large, the student entrepreneur is a bit of a myth. They just don't have the life experience to know what are widespread pain points. What are things that people actually want. They don't know, like, they don't have that sense of, like, what's reasonable in terms of, like, this much level of perfection versus this speed. I mean, even older people don't always get that. Certainly not on, entrepreneurs that are, like, college bound. They have no professional networks by and large. So especially if you're talking about B2B companies where it's about sales, like, you're going out there, they don't have a foot in the door. They can't get a warm intro. So I find, especially in business-to-business startups where I play, there are almost always people with a decent number of years in the industry, both to really understand the problems and to have a network to give them a leg up, like getting those first couple of sales. Now, maybe the out of the blue direct to consumer, like, new game, like, bubble pop game that everyone plays or something. Maybe you can get out there and go viral, but it's not the way I bet.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so get yourself out there, network. That never hurts.
Yeah, go out there. If you think you have a problem, like, in an industry, go out there and work in the industry for a year or two or 3 or 4. It's always going to help.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, now what are the best money moves that early founders can make to protect their cash and extend their runway?
Okay, so there's 2 classes of stuff. One is, like, if I make it big, how do I keep more of that? Let's answer that one second. The first one is I told you I wasn't going to drop an F-bomb. Okay, be cheap, right? Cheap as possible. right? Always think, what can I do for $1? What can I do for free? And it goes back to what we were talking about, testing things. I'll give you a really simple example. A mistake I made in my first startup. My first startup did, let's just call it internet services for summer camps. That's the easier way to do it. Like photo galleries, you could see pictures of what was going on of your kids at camp and other things. So we're like, this is awesome. The product's good. Let's open up a camp store. So you could buy clothing. You could buy, a canteen. You could buy like the little pocket fans that they all seem to like, all that kind of stuff. So we spend a lot of time and a lot of money building a multi-vendor store. And remember, this is like 2001, 2002. This is hard. Spent a whole bunch of time doing it. We roll that out in time for the next session. Crickets. Almost nobody uses it. So I do the post-mortem on it. What I didn't realize was when you drop your child off at camp, or just before that, when you're getting the last minute instructions, that's when you start thinking about, I have to reactivate my account so I can see the photos. Well, guess what? The trunk is already shipped at that point. It's too late to go shopping. So we lost tens of thousands of dollars building that never made it back. What I could have done, and I know in retrospect, is I could have just gone to a single store, one that sells a decent amount of stuff, negotiated a referral fee, an affiliate deal, and just put the link on the site. And I could have checked what percentage of people actually click on that before I built something big. And then I would have looked at it. I'm like, no one's clicking it. And I'm like, no one's clicking it because, we're getting to them too late, and then not built the store. So, it goes without saying, cheap furniture, cheap office space, whatever you could do to keep your costs low. But the big ticket thing is actually not making pricey mistakes where you can test things on the cheap in advance. That's where we save a lot of money.
That kind of goes into something else that you've mentioned where you say that a lot of founders sabotage themselves with complex plans. So what's one simplification that can create like clarity, momentum, I feel like if you would have stepped back and looked at that and tried to go, how can we simplify this? Do you have a tool that can help entrepreneurs do that in their own business?
I sometimes call it, and it's not just me, I call it a pre-mortem. I don't know if you ever heard that before, but you've heard of a post-mortem, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So in the non-strictly literal version of it, it's you look at a project, the project didn't work, and you want to figure out why it failed so that you don't do it again. That's good. You're learning from your mistakes. Better is learning before you make mistakes. So what you do is you sit there, I'm about to build this big store. All right. So let's pretend it's this time next year and it was a colossal failure. Let's brainstorm why that is. Like we're at the end of the book. Let's go fill in the missing chapters beforehand. And let's think about like, how could it have gone bad? Well, okay, the store could crash left, right, and center. That's one thing, right? We could have the wrong products in it. Or, by the way, maybe people just don't get to the store in time. And then for each of these potential pre-mortem like causes of death, ask yourself, well, how do I test these things before I commit? So, okay, the store is going to like crash left, right, and center. I got to go find people who are working with the dev team before and figure out what happened, right? Okay, that's one thing I'm going to do before I hire them. I do all my background checks on them and I cross my fingers. Well, maybe we have the wrong products in there. Well, okay, we can go out there and we can see what people are actually buying. We go into the physical store, we talk to the owners, send out surveys. Like, let's do all that before we stock the store. And then for the other one, we just talked about that. Like maybe they come to it too late. Okay, we'll put up the link and we see if people come. And if no one comes, like we've just saved all that time. So if you do the pre-mortem and brainstorm why it might fail, then when you have all those deals, you try to look for what can I do for $1 or less to like prove that, the numbers are there. Mm-hmm. Then I'll save you a bunch of time. Actually, I'll give you one more cool example.
That's really good, though. That's a really good tip. So I definitely will do that.
If it's all right, I'll give you one more cool example. One of my favorite examples. Be great. So there was a startup. Okay, let me give you a little bit of background on this. So back in 2014, I joined a group called Dream Adventures. It's what we call a startup accelerator. So we'd start with these founders who were, not fully baked yet, right? They had product mostly done, but they hadn't gotten their first revenue yet. So there was a lot of like intense working with them to get them to the point where they're ready. And then at the end of the program, we used to have something called demo day where they get up on stage in front of a bunch of investors, pitch it, and try to raise their seed round. So, we meet with them once or more a week during the course of this program. So what I had learned during this, fairly quickly, I learned that if I gave advice to people, I could tell them, listen, you need to do this. But if I could branch it in the phrase it in the form of a story to another startup that was in something similar, that advice stuck much, much, much more, strongly. That's part of why I wrote my book as a novel instead of just a how-to guide, because I wanted people to put themselves in the shoes of that entrepreneur and really identify with them, and then the lessons really hit home. So I had a startup that was an e-commerce startup. With a lot of e-commerce startups, you live and die on, it was e-commerce, but it's what we call a freemium model. There's a free version, and then, a certain percentage of those people upgrade to the more full-featured version of the product, and you live and die on what percentage of the people make that leap, right? If it's below X, you have no business. To above X, you're golden. So this particular company, they were originally from Costa Rica, so they were having trouble getting their merchant account. They couldn't actually take credit card payments. So listen, we have an assumption that we're going to get X% conversion. If that assumption's wrong, we're out of business, right? And the investors are going to know that. What can we do? We can't wait until demo day and not have this number. What do we do? So that reminded me of a story of a different dream at startup. So I start to tell the story about this company that used to be a blog recommendation platform. And back in 2008, that was kind of a maybe reasonable. They were also freemium. And they were they come into the meeting in week 4, and we're like, well, what's the plan? I'm like, well, we're going to keep building it. And we should be done about 2 weeks before demo day and turn on the premium features, and we'll see how many people convert. And we're like, well, what happens if it's bad? What are you going to go up on stage and talk about on demo day? You'll have no business. Yeah, that's true. That's a risk. Well, how about doing this instead? You know what the premium features are going to be, right? So yeah. You know how much they're going to cost? I go, yeah, just haven't built them. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Put the site up, say, click here to upgrade. Well, what happens if somebody clicks the button? Yeah. Put a message, say, coming soon. Maybe you collect their email address and you come back to them. But you want to know what percentage of the people click that upgrade button, because for them, they think they're really doing it. And that'll give you the data that you need to put in your model and see if you have a real business or not. Okay, no problem. They come back next week and they look horrible. What's wrong? It's
nobody
we
clicked
needed
it.
At least a 2% upgrade. We got basically 0.1, 0.15. Right? We're not even close. There's no way we're optimizing our way to 2. It's well, what are you going to do? It's well, there's one part of our site that people are really, really active on. They're really, really active on the blogs that tell them where in a stadium to sit and where the best value is, sporting stadiums or concert venues. We have an idea for a different company along those lines. Is it okay if we just do that? I mean, we know that you accepted us into the program with this blog, but it's not going to work. Can we pivot? I'm absolutely. You're at a 0 now. Why not? So they changed the business in week 5, built a whole new business, and that business is SeatGeek. That's a $1 billion plus company that would not have existed had they not done that test. Cheap. All they had to do was put the buy now button up or upgrade now button before they built all that stuff. So not just did they not lose 2 months of programming, they would have been a total failure. So I tell this story to the company that's in my cohort, and no problem putting it up right away. They actually go even further. They take the credit card number, or it looks like they're taking the credit card number. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't even leave the user's computer, but they wanted it to be that realistic. And instead it said, hey, congrats, Melanie, you get 3 months free. And the user's oh, that's even better.
Yeah.
So, and they hit their numbers, so they still do that business. But
I love that. That's really, really good advice, because then you're not spending endless money. You're not taking all this time and energy, and you're being more responsible, especially if you have investors. But
yeah, and it's the same thing with a physical store, right? You're thinking about carrying a new line of clothing. you put it in your flyers, put it in your catalog, put it on your, your website. Just do it. They click it. It's coming soon. Well,
Yeah.
no one
No,
clicks it,
that's
then
great.
don't stock it.
I love that. Now, what are some of the most costly mistakes that you see founders make around money that they could easily avoid?
Whew, easily. But okay, so we talked a whole bunch of this stuff about going down blind alleys without testing first. So that's
Yeah.
that's number one. Hiring the wrong people. And these are things that are very hard, right? When you're looking to hire your first person, especially if it's something that you don't know how to do well, which is why you want to hire them, it's doubly hard. So actually, I do talk about this in the book. There was in the book, it's a solo founder to begin with, and he knows that he needs someone who's stronger in sales, in marketing or sales to complement. So he brings this guy who's really good at enterprise sales to meet with his mentor. Have a great conversation. And then he's like, "So what do you think of the guy?" He's like, "I love him. Not the right guy for you. Hire him in 3 years." And he's like, "What?" And he's like, "Well, this guy's never worked in a startup. He's only worked at big companies. So he's not used to making his own desks and getting his own coffee. He's worked at companies, not, not like super mature, but at least ones that were past that the product's changing every 2 weeks. Right? So you had a relatively stable product that you just get really good at selling. Your product's going to be changing like rapidly over the next couple of months. So I think he'd be really great later on, but he's not great for now. And instead, he introduces him to a woman who, more of a growth hacker, had a business with smaller ticket sizes. It wasn't like $100,000 software project. It was like $50 a year subscriptions, which was more of a fit. And her background was a little bit more on the kind of growth hacking side, and that was a better fit. So hiring somebody who's the wrong fit can even break your business. And especially if you're doing business to business sales where the lead time is 6 months or a year to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
you don't know that you've hired the wrong person for like 3-4 months into it. Right? It takes them
Mm-hmm.
some time to get up to speed. So you've lost 3 or 4 months with the new person. Then you've lost another month or two to hire the next person. That's 6 months that you've lost. And in the tech startup world, you only get 18 months of runway plus or minus. So you've lost a third of the oxygen you have in your tank because you hired the wrong person. So that can kill a company.
I think you could still use that same activity of when you're launching a new product or a new service and think, how do I know this is a success or what could go wrong? Do that with your employee too. How do you know that you hired the right person? Look ahead and then be really realistic about what you need. So for our listener, as you're replacing yourself, as you're hiring people, be very realistic about the time that it'll take you to train them, what skill sets they need, how much time you have, and if they need to just jump in and be okay with chaos. Like those are really good tips.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, you might do all of that and still you're taking a risk, right? Like,
Yeah.
the guy's got to get up to speed on the product. He or she's got to get, customers lined up. They got to do some meetings. It could easily be best case scenario 4 months before you can look it up against your metrics and say, no, not a success.
Mm-hmm.
So that one's a really tough one.
Awesome. Well, we're going to shift a little bit. So since, as I said, I own One Stop Tax Strategist with my dad and my sister. We're a family business.
Nice.
We serve entrepreneurs. And so since you've worked with so many entrepreneurs and you've been just in the business so long, I want to shift. Since our mission statement at One Stop Tax Strategist is to bring peace to taxes and purpose to profits to help you live more. That's where this show came from.
Nice.
We're going to have you give, we're going to jump into our tax confessions.
Sure.
So some wins and misses. So across the 70 plus startups that you've supported and been a part of, what tax mistakes do you find that most founders make?
Sure. So the biggest one, which they don't even think about and goes down the road, is kind of tax planning. So let's say you have a huge success. Well, you're going to have to pay cap gains tax when you sell. Ideally, it'll be long-term cap gains tax, but maybe you messed up. Maybe instead of getting what we call reverse vesting stock, which is yours from the get-go, and the clock starts on cap gains, you have options. Well, options are kind of the same thing, except that according to the IRS, you don't get those until you've actually changed the option to equity. And let's say you have a clause that your options become equity when you sell the company. those shares are going to be short-term cap gains. So you lose that. So structuring it as, I know we're getting really wonky here. So doing it as reverse vesting shares instead of options can save you a lot of money. Getting a little further down, there are ways you can actually put the shares of your company in trusts for, say, your kids and avoid a lot of the tax consequences. But the sooner you do that, the lower the lower the tax consequences are, the more you're sheltering for that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
sometimes they're like, oh, I'm going to sell the company in 2 years. And they start thinking about moving parts of the company into their kids' names or grandkids' names. Too late there, right? Already, there's going to be some consequences. But if you start from day one, and this works, tech startups, not tech startups, but if you structure the ownership of your company where, a large chunk of it is maybe in trust for your kids, and you put it in there when it's worth nothing because you've just gotten started, there could be big tax benefits for you.
That's where having that long-term plan, sitting down, what I'm hearing from you, and I'd agree with you, is just sitting down, knowing what your long-term goals are, and then sitting down with a CPA that is strategic for planning for the future and just making sure everything's structured properly. So I'd agree with that.
And that's where someone who knows tax can help you a little bit more than just bookkeeping. Like, listen, you could have like one conversation with the tax people for estate planning. And, maybe the estate planning is the conversation you have once a year. Make sure that you're kind of on track. You're not missing these opportunities. The bookkeeping is a different thing. Like, there's a lot of founders, so I'm going to do it myself, and they're not very good at it, right? And it takes up a bunch of time that they could be doing for other things. So one of the recommendations I have is the moment they have a little bit of money to play with, to get what's called a fractional CFO or a fractional bookkeeper who does that. Like, no startup became a success because their bookkeeping was awesome as opposed to good enough. They have failed because their bookkeeping was bad. They have not been able to raise rounds because their books were such a mess that the investors couldn't get their mind around things. In fact, a lot of investors in the Series A will put a clause in the investment that you must have, quality books, and they'll end up biting the bullet and getting their own CFO or outsourcing it.
Yeah.
So a lot of them will do this kind of DIY bookkeeping for a lot longer than they should. And it's not a good use of their time. And they're not getting great data to run their business on.
Yep. It's the data. And then also going back to tax planning, we always say that's our first step. We have a Live More tax solution or an 8-step tax solution. First step is to know your numbers, because if you have a bad set of books and you have bad numbers and you can't do tax planning, that's going to cost you possibly tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars because you can't tax plan with accurate numbers.
I would say actually the 0th step there is know where you want to go.
Yeah,
right? Like they say,
that is.
If you don't know where you want to go, any path will get you there. But I'm sure that's kind of implicit. Like, you sit down with them, you understand what their goals are, what their family situation is, what the options are. And then you clean everything up and start to implement.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we'll shift more into live more moments. Now, you've mentored hundreds of founders. What's a moment where you helped somebody else live more?
So this is going to be like a pastiche of moments, and it's actually something we don't do very often, but we should do more of. And that's I've told founders it's time to throw in the towel. So let me kind of sketch what happens a lot. Like, the really good founders hate to lose. They hate to give up. Right? I look for that when I'm looking for founders to invest in. I want, when the going's tough, I want them to keep plugging away. I don't want someone who's like, it's not going so I'm going to just get a corporate job and be done with it. So since I'm optimizing for that, you also have the founders who just don't give up and they keep banging at it, even though they're not kind of breaking through that wall. And after a certain point of time, odds are you're not going to break through the wall, right? Like, if you're smart and persistent, you start and you make your list of all the things you might possibly try. And of course, you're going to put the ones that are most likely to succeed at the top of the list and hit them first, because otherwise, that's just dumb, right? So by the time you've worked your way deep into that list, you're getting the stuff that was really low down on your list, really low likelihood of success. But that's it. You're trying it. They're almost like Hail Marys. And at some point, the odds are so small that you really should just fold it and move on to something else. Now, from my perspective as the investor, I never want you to do that. Even if there's a 1 in a million chance, that's still better than a zero, right? You should keep going forever. Just keep cranking away at it. If one of them works, that's fine. But as a former founder and just kind of like a human being, there's one point where I just can't. I'm like, Melanie, I can't see you like spending another year of your life on this. Right?
Hmm.
This is just call it quits. I'm sure you'll come up with 3 new ideas by Tuesday. Right? The moment this is shut down, because that's who you are. And, those will be new ideas with a fresh chance of success. So, a large part of living well is to not keep banging your head against the wall that's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Kevin O'Leary always talks about take it behind the barn and shoot it.
Yeah.
To say it bluntly.
Yeah, you got to rip the Band-Aid off sometimes. Now, there's a very cool cartoon.
How do you know?
Oh.
How do you know it's to that point then?
Well, that's the cartoon I was going to tell you about. Like, there's this cartoon where it says like the difference between a good entrepreneur and a bad entrepreneur, and like it's a picture of a guy with like a pickaxe, and like he's like digging a sideways tunnel, and if he's over here, and there's like, well, here right on the other side there's a breakthrough with treasure, and like the good entrepreneur is swinging away, and the other one got to that point, threw down the pickaxe, and went away, gave up. So the moral is like the good entrepreneur doesn't give up. Problem is like you don't know that the treasure is right on the side of the wall. For all you know, it's nothing but solid, mountain all the way back. So it goes back to what we were talking about a moment ago. Right? You started out. You had your list of things you were going to try. At some point, you're so down in the like low odds of success bottom of your list. You ask yourself like, why am I doing this? Now, maybe you layer with this, this is a success if in the beginning, like, hey, listen, if I haven't made it by this part of the list, these other ones, probably not, right? And things can change. People will get feedback, like maybe this is a good idea and you move it up. But you should have kind of an a priori that, after 2 years, if I'm not at least at this level, of progress with my startup, I'm going to pull the plug.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's good. Know when to say it's enough.
Yeah. But set it a little in advance if you can, because otherwise it's all too easy to say, I'm so close. Like, I know I didn't hit my numbers yet, but I'm so close.
Yeah. And then you just keep doing that. Now, you have a new book out called The Entrepreneur's Odyssey. I'm excited to read it after talking with you and just to dig into it. Especially, you said you've laid it out like a story.
Yeah.
Which lesson in there that you've laid out helps founders create more margin, freedom, or peace in their lives? You want to tell us a little bit about something in there?
Sure. So, I'll give you like the background, right? So, like, I actually don't really like business books. I know it's weird for me to say it. It's a lot of like the same like bland Midwestern style ghost written like chapters, and each chapter is like anecdote, name drop, and then like 15, 20 pages later, there's like a bullet point list at the end of the chapter of what you learn. Well, guess what? You rip out those end of chapter bullet points, staple them together. That's a wonderful 20-page PowerPoint. But it's even the good ones are hard to read that way.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do it in a memorable way. And, the light bulb went off with the story I told you before, that stories are a memorable way. And I wanted to be able to embed all the lessons that I've used in the various different startups that could teach lessons into this fictional arc of a regular startup. So one of them that I put in there that's probably something you should figure out relatively early and can do the most to change the margins of your business is what's your revenue model? Like, how are you charging? So, most obvious one is like, here, I'm selling like reading glasses. I'm going to charge per glasses. But there are a lot of other models out there. So in the book, I have the founder taking his son to school by subway. It's in Manhattan because it's where I live. And, he's kind of just to casually chat with his son. He's like, isn't it cool that like the same $2.90 that we're paying to go 4 stops to your school, we could go all the way out to Coney Island if we wanted to. And his son's like, no, Dad, that sucks, right? You should pay more. Like if I owned the subway, I'd be rich. I wouldn't, to pay by distance, right? So instead of an all-you-can-eat revenue model, his like 11-year-old son's like, no, you got to pay per usage. And that actually develops into a dialogue where they're talking about different ways to price it. Well, what about I don't know, students. Well, that can be free, right, for students. Or what about people who live all the way out in, distant parts of Brooklyn and need to get to work? And it's like, well, okay, maybe they get 2 free, 1 to work, 1 back, and everything else they have to pay. So now we're talking about a freemium model, right? And then the son says, well, Dad, it's expensive to have a car in the city, right? He goes, yeah. It's like, well, how about you sell your car and you give me half of what you save, because now you don't have to park it. Now you don't have to put gas in it. You can just take the subway instead. So that's a share of savings revenue model. So I try to embed within that kind of cute little conversation a way of thinking about a good number of the different types of ways that you can charge for a product. So to go back to the question, like if you're an entrepreneur, there may be a way that most people charge for it, but that doesn't need to be the way you do it. Go back to the drawing board. Ask yourself, is there a better way to align the value I create with the money I extract from my customer?
Yeah, I like that. That's great. Now, if every entrepreneur walked away with one core truth from your entrepreneurial Odyssey, from your book, what would you want that to be?
One core truth. Don't just do something. Stand there. It's not in the book, but the idea is before you go out and do something, take the time to make sure you're doing the right thing, right? We talked about, a whole bunch of examples, but like there's one point in the very beginning where like he pitches, he thinks he's going to be selling this product to enterprise sales, people, big, people use Salesforce and all that. And, within a few short paragraphs, the angel investor is like, listen, that's not going to work because the core product of what you're doing doesn't fit with that. He says, well, what's your other hypothesis? Well, I think I'd go after maybe people who are kind of busy on the go, individual professionals like real estate agents or general contractors. And he's like all ready to go and start coding. And his mentor says, stop. You're going to go out there and you are going to talk to 20, 30, 50, however many individuals. You can do your customer discovery. And he's like, well, I have to build the products they can test. And it's like, no, you're going to buy yourself a pack of index cards, right? Index cards. You're going to write on each index card, draw out what the screen looks like. You're going to put them in front of the customer. Pretend that this is the app on your phone. Don't ask me what you should do. I'm not here. You've just downloaded it. Just verbalize like what you're thinking. And when you press something, I'll give you another card for what you get. And he had to do that like 20 times to really understand that what he was building was what people wanted. People didn't click on a feature, he doesn't build that feature. Talks to them afterwards. If they look like hesitant and like, it's kind of meh, you don't do it at all. But that's another example of don't just do something. Stop, make sure you're doing the right thing, and then do it.
That's really, really good advice. I know I'm going to take a lot of that stuff and implement it, asking the customer, how do we know it's successful? And then also, I love the pre-mortem conversation. If this died, what could we go back? What went wrong and how can we fix it? So really good advice. Thank you for sharing your stories, your mistakes, some lessons that have helped you build so many businesses and lives with more clarity and intention. So I just really do appreciate your time. If you're listening right now and want to go deeper, make sure you check out Andrew's book, The Entrepreneur's Odyssey. We're going to link it in the show notes. It'll be on Amazon, or you can find it along with his other resources at andrewbackerman.com. And so make sure you check that out in the show notes. And don't stop here. Next episode is going to be packed with more ways to create focus, margin, and a life that you're excited to live. So go ahead and just let it roll. You don't want to miss it.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd ask that you leave a quick and honest review to help more business owners find the show.